So it's 2:10. We're getting into the home stretch of a long but fabulous 3 days. And I'm very happy to introduce our last speaker, Ayda Cader, who recently graduated from the NYU Stern School of Business. She's from Seattle, Washington, graduated from Dartmouth College. Prior to Stern, she worked in human resources and philanthropy at Liberty Mutual in Boston and Mexico City. She has transitioned to management consulting at McKinsey. In her free time, she enjoys international travel, though I assume she's not doing much of that these days, shopping at Costco, and DIYing home improvement projects. So I'm going to turn things over to you. Thank you very much, and we're looking forward to your talk.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Very nice introduction, Rich. So let me go ahead and just get my screen up here. All right. Can you guys see my screen? Just a verbal yes if you can.
No, not yet.
No, we can't.
Not yet. Is it visible now?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so thank you for that very kind introduction, Rich. So just want to say hi, everyone. My name is Ayda Cader. So a little bit about me. I've been a recruiter, I've been a manager, I've hired people, I've fired people, I've managed internship programs, and I have been an intern myself. So I went to Dartmouth College, worked in HR in Boston, Seattle, and Mexico City. And then I went to business school at NYU Stern, worked at Ernst & Young in San Francisco, and now I've transitioned to management consulting at McKinsey & Company in New York. So having hired and managed interns for several years, I know what a standout intern looks like. I've been the person deciding who gets a full-time offer and who doesn't. So I've distilled some wisdom for you all from my experience that you can act upon as you head into your summer internships. And you will get a copy of this presentation so you can reference it later on. And if you want to get in touch, feel free. My email is on the slide up here. As we get into the content, please go ahead and post your questions in the chat, and I'll address them all at the end. I don't know if my video just, did my screen just cut?
We can still see just the intro slide with your name and the photo.
So you can see it. Okay, let me see. If I flip to the next slide, can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, great. I guess it's just on my end that it's looking funny. All right. So as with any worthwhile journey, there is a beginning, a middle, and an end. And you are at the very exciting beginning, but internships are so often what you make of them. And I want your internships to be amazing. So we'll talk about what we can do and control at each of these three parts of the internship journey. And we'll spend most of our time on the during part, this middle part, specifically on managing your manager and addressing common internship problems that you might face. Now, after I binged Tiger King, I've been watching a lot of Star Wars in quarantine. So I'm now on the 8th movie, and you're gonna see some familiar characters just pop up throughout these slides. So today, we are at the before. And as you head into your internship, just take a moment to reflect. See the questions here. Why did you want this internship? And what are you seeking to get out of it? So this will help you shape your expectations and your goals, arguably the most important things to prepare in advance. Now, the learning curve for a new job can be steep, and that means that you're going to have to really plan in advance for the inevitable mishaps that will come early in the process. So make it your responsibility at the start of your internship to ask what the employer would like you to accomplish. Find out if there are supposed to be trainings, projects for you to take part in, and what your role is supposed to be on the team. Probably in your first week, you're going to map out objectives, deliverables for the summer with your manager. and you'll probably be asked what you want to get out of the internship. So be prepared with well-articulated goals and what you want to learn. If things veer off course during the internship, you can correct that by speaking with your manager about the goals that you discussed at the outset. And if you don't think about what you want, you're likely to just agree to whatever work comes up, whether you're interested in it or not. Now, employers really respect interns who show initiative and can communicate with their peers about what they're interested in, their expectations, both positively and clearly. So having these explicit goals with your manager will help you prioritize, especially when things unavoidably come up through the course of your summer. Now, once you've identified your goals, make sure to write them down. Then time box them. At which points in the summer should you have accomplished and addressed each goal? Is it 2 weeks in, 30 days in, or is it closer to the end of the internship? So now that's the formal goal setting that you discuss with your manager. Aside from that conversation early on, you want to also determine what does success look like for your summer internship for you personally. So before your first day, think about what this means. Is it about leaving the internship with a better understanding of a new career path? Is it about a technical or soft skill? Is it about becoming more disciplined with your time management? Or is it about securing the full-time offer? So take some time to just think about what that means for you. Now, before your first day, and many of you have already done some form of this already, but just make sure that you read up as much as possible about the company. So news articles, competitors, industry trends, who's who at the company. If they have social media channels, go ahead and take a look. Look up employees on LinkedIn to get an idea of who works there. Or if you know the names of some of the people you'll work with, then I encourage you to do some light LinkedIn stalking. Some of you will be at smaller or larger organizations, and to the extent that you can gather advanced information about the workplace culture, their hierarchy, protocols, try to do that. And when you do that kind of advanced prep, you come in with really insightful questions informed by that base knowledge. So you could come across some terminology in your research that you're unfamiliar with, and then you can find out what that means so that you just help soften that learning curve when you enter the company on your first day. Now, a few tips for you just to imbue success into your summer internship habits. So firstly, always take notes during meetings. I have had interns before who wouldn't take notes in meetings, not because of any fault of their own, they just didn't realize that, hey, I'm an intern, I need to be absorbing all the expertise that's being offered because I as an intern don't have that much expertise to offer. So it is also very impressive when your colleagues are trying to remember the details of a meeting and you can chime in with that accuracy from the notes that you've taken. If you haven't used Microsoft OneNote before, I strongly recommend it. It's essentially a digital notebook program that allows you to tag, categorize, easily search for your notes. Now, second, check in at the start of the day and at the end of the day. That small action will pay really large dividends. So, you know that saying, out of sight, out of mind? Yeah. Avoid falling into that, especially in a virtual setting. So send a morning IM to say hello and another when you're wrapping up the day. And at the end of the day, ask your manager if they need anything or anything you can help them with, either immediately or tomorrow. So you never know when someone may need help. They may be too busy to pull up and think you could help them out. And that's not just your manager. You could check in with other teammates and just generate that sense of presence and willingness to help. Now, document your activities at the end of each week. So at the end of each week, go ahead and write down what you did that week, what you completed, what you learned, what went well, not so well. Not only does that help you tie together the themes of your work, but it's a very useful reference for when you get to the end of your summer and you're heading into your performance review, you can look back and think about what you have worked on. It's also a really good reference for when you're updating your resume. So you'll have this nice record of everything that you've worked on. And this last one, so I know mindset and enthusiasm have been addressed a few times over the last couple days, but I just have to emphasize it here again. Volunteer to help where you can. So bringing that can-do attitude really makes a difference. Willingness to assist in different ways leaves a lasting impression with your team. And when you're discussed about your review and your performance at the end of the summer, the memory of your attitude will be remembered. It'll make a difference in how you are evaluated. So for a good number of you, you'll be working from home. And I would say be fully present virtually. Don't be tempted by many distractions around you. It's easy to check out and to just be on your phone where you know that no one's going to see you using your phone. But I guarantee you, your manager, your team will know how much effort you're putting in based on your work product and what you've produced, how available and responsive you are. So do yourself a favor if you could put your phone away when you're working from home, unless you really need it for work. And now the last aspect of this mindset here is confidence. So you belong. Your employer wants you in the internship. And the thing is, your coworkers are people, and sometimes people can be forgetful. So make sure that if it's not done already when you join, that you're included in team huddles, department, company-wide meetings, email lists, Slack channels. Speak up if you're feeling out of the loop or that you're just missing information that everyone else seems to have. So now let's say, assuming you did all the best prep that you could do. Now you're in your internship and your manager just isn't great. So you can manage your manager in how you behave and how you communicate. And a big theme here in improving working relationships is communication. So aside from the work itself, your manager has a big impact on your experience of the summer. So the first thing you should do in any close working relationship is to ask about communication preferences. So what's the best way to be in touch? Is it by phone, email, chat, setting time in the calendar? Is there a time of day that's better than others to ask quick questions? Do afternoons get really filled up with meetings? Ask those questions up front so that you don't lose time trying to figure it out on your own. And especially if you're doing a virtual internship, you need to be blunt about asking these questions because you are not going to have the opportunity to read body language or those in-person signals about people's communication preferences. So on the slide, I have these 3 common cases of internship scenarios with managers where things are not going great. So the first common case is if a manager is too involved. Maybe they're micromanaging. So this often comes from a lack of trust. In any new relationship, a manager could be unsure of what you can handle. So on your end, what you can do as the intern is to be very communicative, give progress reports without being asked. You can do more frequent check-ins so that your manager is aware of how you're doing. By showing that you take ownership of your work and being proactive about your communications, with time, you can build more trust with that manager, and it'll also be based on your performance. So be patient with this kind of relationship. Keep in mind that whenever I've worked with an employee or a manager, that there's this sort of micromanagement element, it often seems like the manager's being intrusive, but usually on the manager side, they just see it as them being very proactive, trying to have positive intent and trying to help the employee. So that's one sort of root cause of that micromanagement. Another is if you made a mistake and now this manager is concerned about another error. So in that situation, you want to directly address the cause of the error, how you plan to prevent it next time on your own, and then lay out your planned steps. If you schedule time to review at the end of your process, not at every step, that helps the manager just feel like they're aware, they're in the loop, but they don't have to be there with you at every single step in your process. They just have a sense of where it's going. So sharing that work plan that you have. Now, the second common case is a manager who's the opposite. They're too hands-off, or they're just so busy that they may as well be a ghost to you. So try to determine if this manager is distant because they expect you to be very independent, or because they are extremely busy. Are you the only person feeling alienated, or is this just their style? So if they expect you to be very independent, have a conversation about frequency and the form of communication that would be helpful for you to get acclimated. For getting time outside of regular checkpoints, make your asks of this sort of manager short and direct. Something like, I'm unclear on a piece of the last assignment you gave me. Is there a convenient time for you to go over it with me tomorrow for 15 minutes? So very defined what kind of support you're seeking, and then also keeping in mind that it would be a two-way conversation, so making sure that you define what your manager needs from you as well. So I also mentioned that this kind of distant manager might be inaccessible because they're extremely busy. So in this case, they could be excited to have an intern, but there's only just so much time in the day. So they can't be relied upon consistently to respond to you. If that happens to you, then compile your questions in a running list. See if you can get your questions answered by a teammate first, someone else who's just more accessible and responsive. And once you know how your manager prefers to communicate, email, meeting, etc., when you are able to get in front of them, you can use the time efficiently because you have already prepared your questions, and those are the ones that couldn't be answered by your other colleagues. Now, the third common case is if you are paired with an inexperienced manager. So oftentimes internships can be a trial run at management for a new manager. So this person may still be learning the ropes themselves on how to set goals, giving you feedback, determining assignments, how much guidance to give you. So the first week conversations about expectations, what you want out of your internship and your summer goals, that has extra importance here in this situation. So you need to give your manager more direction as to what you want and need, because unlike experienced managers, this one may not know when and what to ask. So be prepared to share what you're skilled at so they have a better sense of what complexity you could handle. And being transparent about any work you received that was a struggle, you'd want to partner with them to just gauge the right fit of work for you. Also, sometimes an experienced manager is trying to figure out how much to be hands-on or hands-off. So the tips of the former two cases could apply here as well. So here's another situation of, I don't have enough work. And there's not enough work assigned to you. You're bored, you're strumming your fingers on your desk, you're tempted to play on your phone. It can be really disheartening to repeatedly admit that you just don't have that much to do. So you should first communicate that you have time to help with more. Express your interest so you can guide what kind of additional work may come your way. And if there is just very little more to come from your manager, the best tactic that I have seen from an intern is to use their spare time to have informational interviews with others in the organization. And if it's appropriate during those conversations to mention that you have capacity and you could ask how you may be able to support their work. Alternatively, and depending sort of on the culture of your organization, you could approach your manager that you spoke with X person whose work seemed interesting, and would it be okay for you to work on some projects with them? So a manager would be more likely to be impressed by your initiative and resourcefulness in that. If you've already expressed that you don't have that much work to do, your manager's probably trying to figure out, scramble, try to find something to give you, and they don't want it to be something that's really not high impact for you. So if you can go and source something yourself, that's great. So in addition to that example, here's just a list of a few self-directed activities that you could take on your own if you're needing more work. So you can really generate more work on your own. So this phrase of, I'm just doing grunt work, the internship is just grunt work. So there is so much to learn about an organization, and much of that learning takes place during doing that run-of-the-mill kind of work. So you could see this grunt work as a reliability test. Can you handle some low-risk tasks early on? Even if you think the work is boring, still show interest. Ask about how it fits into the bigger picture, what process it supports, and who else will see it and why. Simply by being curious and asking those kinds of questions, you show to your employer that you can think about more than just the task that's in front of you. You're ready to take on something that's more complex because you can see the connections between each piece of work in an organization. And it's also important because this fetches you credibility points. So the benefit of doing these sort of tasks is really that you get to accrue these credibility points that if you mess up with something bigger, it'll get you a second chance because you've already sort of garnered this credibility from doing this easier work thoroughly, accurately, quickly. But if it seems that the entirety of the internship will be grunt work, then speak with your manager. Recall the goal-setting conversation that you'd had early on about what you wanted to learn and to get out of the internship. Ask if you could diversify your workload, get more exposure to a particular project of interest to you. And if you are met with any form of no or something like, well, this is all we have for you right now, don't fret. Just keep a positive attitude and you can revisit the topic again. Continue to emphasize a desire to learn and contribute rather than conveying boredom. And then worst case, let's say you're nearing the end of the internship and things haven't changed, refocus so that you can capitalize on something to add to your resume. So say you're reviewing lots of documents and it's not hard, switch to aim for volume. Your resume bullet could read something like, reviewed 200 plus scientific articles within 6 weeks to support further research on X. So you want to get something out of the experience and you can reframe it. This, I don't want to look stupid. So it's often the desire to not look stupid which makes interns avoid asking questions. But as the new intern, you're expected to not know everything. So ask questions of your manager, your mentor, your teammates. During a meeting, if you don't want to stop the flow of the conversation with your question, just jot it down and plan to ask it privately. I will say, though, that there are some questions which you can and should Google. These are usually questions that are general, they're not specific to your company or to the project. It's probably something more industry-wide or a general topic. So for that kind of thing, do some online research and then confirm your understanding with a colleague once you have a just more general sense. Now, you may hear acronyms very, very often. And you should ask what they stand for the very first time that you hear them. If you don't, then all of a sudden you're 3 weeks in, you don't know what TAS stands for, and everyone assumes that you do because you haven't said anything otherwise. So let's say that your manager gives you a project, but the directions don't quite make sense to you. You're having trouble seeing the bigger picture. You should ask, ask, ask. It's your right as an intern, it's their duty as a manager. They will be impressed that you care about getting it right the first time and just learning about the overall field. And even if you think you have all the directions right, a good practice is to repeat back all of the details of the project to make sure that you're on the same page. Email is useful for outlining very complicated directions, but often a phone call is quicker and can actually communicate more information. And since so many of these internships are going to be virtual, it gives your manager more of a voice to your name so that they hear more of you and that makes you more memorable. So this last one about a deadline, I can't tell you how often the miscommunication about timing of a deliverable happens for an intern. So an intern could be asked to do something the manager doesn't give them a date, but they think it's pretty straightforward, so they just fully expect it to be done end of day or the next day. But the intern may think, okay, it's not that urgent. My manager knows I have all this other stuff that I need to do, so I can get this back by end of day Friday. And there's just an assumption there and a misalignment about timing. So don't assume when it comes to deadlines. Ask so that you can determine the timing, if that's reasonable for you or if you need to adjust, and to help them set expectations on your timing. That helps your manager also get a better sense of what your workload is like. So one way to keep organized, to track your questions, check your assumptions, is by driving the agenda for your regular check-in meetings. This is an example of how I ask interns to prepare for weekly one-on-ones. So you go over your projects, your current assignments, what's done so far, what's not going so well, or what challenges there are, and just what the takeaways are on each project that they've been working on. And then in that miscellaneous section, it really opens up the discussion for personal development, as well as any other open items that a manager might bring up. So by doing this, you can be comprehensive, and then you can also just neatly include an ask for feedback, that second line in miscellaneous, which is the next common internship issue about not receiving feedback. So summer internship is not a terribly long time. If you aren't doing something well, you want to know quickly so that you can improve before the summer is over. Not all managers are great at giving frequent and actionable feedback. So if this happens to you, make sure you ask for that feedback. Do not assume that just because you aren't hearing any, or at least no constructive feedback, that does not mean that everything is going swimmingly. So in your first week, you'll likely be getting more direction, more guidance, just as you settle in. And then from there, make sure you have regular checkpoints on the calendar to receive feedback. So the feedback may be included in a weekly one-on-one to go over your work in general, just as I structured in the document I showed you earlier. But make sure that you are bringing questions to help you assess and improve your performance. At no point during your internship should you feel unsure of how well you're doing, and really your performance review at the end of the summer should not be a surprise. So let's say that you do get some feedback, but it's vague and unhelpful. What do you do with that? Actively engage with that. So get to the root of the sentiment. Ask us for a specific example to help illustrate what they mean, and make sure that the feedback you receive is something you can actually take action on soon. So ask for a person who could help assist you, or to shadow someone, a training resource, something to read, an article. And should the feedback just not click, you can get another perspective. So if you have a mentor or a buddy for the summer, you should approach them for their thoughts and for their advice. So now, end of summer, your internship is coming to an end. So of course, send thank you emails to the people that you worked with, provide them with your non-work contact info, collect the contact and email addresses of your colleagues so you can stay in touch once you are back in school. And an update email once you go back to school goes a long way toward maintaining the relationship and to future opportunities. So if you need a reference later on, you'll be able to draw on that relationship that you have grown beyond the summer. And it feels a little disingenuous if you reach out several months later just for a reference and you haven't been in touch with them at all for anything else. So when the internship is fresh in your mind and you have your weekly recap notes, update your resume and your LinkedIn. So whether you loved the internship or not, it's a valuable experience to add to your candidate profile. The fact that you were employed before goes a long way toward the next employer that reviews your candidacy. And then you should reflect on your work product. Review what you created over the summer, what you worked on, and the relationships that you've built. This is going to be material for future interview questions. So you should be answering for yourself, did I meet the goals I set at the beginning, or did I meet my personal definition of success? So then self-reflect on the company and in this sort of role. Pull up and think more broadly about your fit. So I've watched students leave their internships and say, that wasn't for me. And then they have a better idea of what they want and don't want, and they can convert that insight into a search plan for the following year. So you should use your internship really as a learning, as practice, as a growth opportunity. And a career that it lasts a long time, potentially 40 years or more. So a 2 to 3 month experience is a very small part of that time span. But if you think about your experience very critically, then you can position yourself toward a fulfilling career, and you can just really navigate yourself toward what you really want. So that is all of my prepared remarks, and I can go ahead and do some questions.
Kat, do you want to ask the question live?
Hi, sure. That was a great talk. Thank you so much, first and foremost. I was taking notes furiously on Google Drive, but I typed a question into the chat. What would you say are some ideal questions to ask an employer during an interview?
So I kind of have a list in my head, and I've heard some that are really great. One of them is read about a company's vision and mission statement and what their values are, and have them written down in front of you when you're in the interview, and then ask your interviewer, of the values that the company has stated, which of those do you see enacted on a daily basis? Which of them do you really see this company embodies? Can you give me an example? And that will help you get a sense of how well what they say aligns with what they do.
Great, thank you so much.
I don't know if
Could I ask, can you turn off screen share so we can see folks?
Sure.
I want to follow up on the, especially with people working virtually, it's that much harder to be, there's concern of being out of sight, out of mind. And it's really a lot up to the interns to make sure that they have work to do and that they're checking in with managers. And you said, you know, if you don't have enough work or if you're not getting enough contact to reach out, how do you do so without being, without annoying them or without being a pest? And how do you have the right degree of deferentiality so that they appreciate you, but you're not getting in their way?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. So I'll say that, and this is, I'm not trying to punt the question, but it's that some managers are more flexible than others and just have more tolerance than others. And it also, I would say, depends a bit on cultures. So let's say that you're in an organization that's very hierarchical, and you as an intern are, you know, sort of going back and forth, and you're asking for more guidance and more help, and that's just not their company culture, that you're expected to really self-serve before you go and you start asking questions. So I'd say that it'll take some EQ on your part to try to figure out each person's tolerance for when they start to feel annoyed that you're being a pest. But I think that the best way to get around that, regardless of any individual's sort of tolerance, is if you try to do some research and you try to self-serve and you try to figure out something on your own, and then you go and approach someone and say, hey, I have this idea, or this is my hypothesis, can you help clarify this for me? Just so you're showing up with something and you're not saying, hey, spoon feed me, I don't know anything. So depends on a person, but most people tend to take it well if you show up with some idea.
Right. How about asking for visibility to senior leadership, especially at a company that's not a small organization? You know, we really like for our interns to ideally meet with the CEO or meet with senior leaders. How do you go about doing that when you're not in the office, you don't pass them in the hallway, and you might have a few layers between you and senior leadership. Is that something people should feel comfortable asking their manager? You know, might it be possible for me to get a one-on-one with the CEO at some point this summer?
Yeah, I think it's certainly worth asking, and especially because in-person internship programs usually have some kind of component or a session where the CEO or senior manager will come in and speak to the interns. So if you're not there in person, you risk losing that aspect. So unless the company has set up some kind of virtual alternative so that there's still that exposure to senior leadership, if that's not there, then an intern should certainly go to their manager and say, you know, I'm really interested in this particular executive, what their department is doing, the work they're doing, sort of the vision that they're leading the company down. If there's any opportunity to have a chat with them, I would appreciate that. So just putting in the ask can allow you to get some time with a senior executive that you wouldn't if you just never even tried to ask.
Great. Does anyone, we're out of time, but does anyone have a last question? Oh, I see Amy has one. Amy, do you want to ask it live?
Oh, hi. Thank you for your presentation, by the way. It was really engaging. But I have, I guess, two questions, but like they're totally like connected. So I said, how would you approach a supervisor or manager to create like a mentorship, and how do I like begin that conversation?
Yeah, so do you mean that you want a mentor from that particular supervisor, or you want that supervisor to help introduce you to someone else to mentor you?
Like have that supervisor be my mentor.
Yeah. So I think that's it's always great to have a mentor and to seek one out. So I would say that if you have been working with a supervisor for a couple weeks and you feel like this is a person who has been able to give you honest feedback, who's accessible to you, seems like they have your best interests at heart, and they're somebody you feel comfortable talking to, then you could say, you know, I really enjoyed you being my supervisor. And even beyond the relationship where I'm working on your team, I would appreciate it if you would continue to be my mentor. Is that something that you would be interested in? And they'd probably be flattered. They would probably love hearing that. And then from there, you would want to talk more about what does that mentorship look like? So what's the time commitment that they're signing up for? So I think asking someone to be your mentor is always going to be, they're always going to take it well because it means you think highly of them. So I think just making sure that that person, and you already have a good working relationship, so you know what the mentorship relationship would be like.
Thank you.
Actually, have a follow-up on that. I've never had a formal mentor. And I'm wondering, I know some companies have formal mentorship programs where you get assigned to someone and there's a more structured program. But for me, it's always been, you know, just people at more senior levels that I've developed relationships with who've played a mentoring role through my career. Mm-hmm. Under what circumstances, if you were to ask someone to be a mentor, should you make a formal ask like that? And under how, if you don't make such a formal ask, could it be more natural and less putting them on the spot? And what do you think the best ways of approaching it would be?
Yeah, so I think the way that I have personally approached it is, to be honest, anytime I've had a mentor, a formal mentor where I referred to that person as my mentor, it was through some kind of like program or a paired mentorship relationship. The mentorship relationships that have come more organically for me have been through the course of working with someone, and we forged more and more of almost a friendship where they're happy to help I can bounce ideas off of them, they're happy to respond. And I don't think we ever formally gave it a title of this person is my mentor, but there was very much an understanding between the two of us that if I needed help with something, that they were going to be one of the first couple people in the firm that I would go and ask. So I would say that's sort of a mentorship piece. And then another thing I just want to highlight is sponsorship. So I don't know if you have heard about the difference between mentorship and sponsorship, but they're certainly two different things within an organization. A mentor is someone that you may like go out to coffee with, have more like chats, you can bounce ideas off of, but that person isn't necessarily going to be the person to help you make moves in the organization, to help do an internal referral for something. A sponsor is usually someone who is a very high level executive who can help pull you into a role that you want to be in. So just making a distinction there of these two different sort of ideologies, I guess, of mentorship versus sponsorship, because this whole like sponsorship idea is getting more and more steep. But back to the point about the mentorship, I've always had it be a more like natural, organic thing without a label.
It almost to me feels like asking someone, will you be my friend? Which, again, if there's a formal program or even some kind of structured program, it's great. But otherwise, really, it's a matter of developing those relationships. Good. I see Lydia has a question, but we're getting out of time. So can we answer quickly? And then
Sure,
we're
yes.
at, last minutes of boot camp. And thank you again. This has been fabulous.
Sure. Okay. So just real quick, how do you suggest going about exploring new interests within a company in an area where you don't have experience? I would tell you to try to find some folks to have informational interviews with. So it could be a cold reach out that you see their name in the company internal directory, or if you have some teammates or a supervisor, say, hey, I'm interested in this department. Do you know anybody? Could you facilitate an introduction? And just asking somebody for just 30 minutes of their time to just have a chat. Most people like talking about themselves, so they'd be happy to hear from you. So that's a good way to just start broaching the topic and collecting more information.
Great. So
Thank
one last
you.
thing before you leave. Thank you so much. This has been fabulous. As we've been doing over the course of the past 3 days, we've been doing a number of self-indulgent screenshots. And my screen only allows 25 pictures at a time. But Tina wrote to me that you should be able to get up to 49, which for some reason my MacBook Pro doesn't allow, but Tina said that she could take screenshots. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna count to 3 and smile, and Tina will be the official photographer, and hopefully we'll get everyone at once. So everyone get ready to smile. Tina, are you ready? She might be muted.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not now muted. I'm ready. So at the count, should I? Okay, I'll just do. Okay, so at the
Yeah, you
count
might
of
as well do the count.
yeah, at the count of 3, please like hold your smile for like 5 seconds. Okay. All right. 1, 2, 3. Okay, there. Oh, some people were not sharing video actually.
So everyone turn your video on.
Okay, let's do this again. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Got it. Okay.
Awesome. Great. We are in the home stretch. We've got a few minutes left just to recap. Thank you so much once again, Ayda. This was fabulous and a great way to end our 3 days of boot camp. So thank you.